Good. I can see. This is good.
Too early in the morning to put on stuff like this. Det kan du godt. Er det noget med, at vi skal være færdige? Er det lidt før... Vi har 20 minutter, men ikke helt 20 minutter, vel? Altså... Ja, det er fint. Altså... She'll give me a sign when we're...
Okay, when we're ready to go.
Yeah, so you have to really speed up and tell all the things you need to tell. So that, okay.
Velkommen til Ruth Ware, som fortæller om sin nye bog i en mørk skov sammen med Kåre V. Poulsen. Welcome to Ruth Ware.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming this morning. So this interview will obviously be in English, since we have a British writer here. How are you doing in Denmark?
I'm enjoying it very much. Yeah,
good.
it's very cold, I have to say. I didn't bring enough warm clothes.
So you seem to like to scare the shit out of people. Why is that so funny?
I don't know. I don't set out to scare people. I don't think I write very scary books, although a lot of reviewers say that I do. I get a lot of comments from readers saying how scary my books are. But I don't find them very scary when I write. I think because as the writer you're in control of the situation. So it's very difficult to scare yourself because the essence of being frightened is uncertainty. It's the point when someone pulls back the curtain and you're not sure what you're going to see behind it, if it's going to be a monster or something completely innocent. And for me, it's not scary because I know if there's a monster there, it's because I put it there and I'm waiting for it to come out.
But still, I mean, you have to write books where the suspension of disbelief is so strong that people think it's actually real. And I think there's something uncanny about both of the books I've read that you've written. So in your first book, in Danish, which was out last year, Woman in Cabin number 10,
Yeah.
you sort of have this woman who witnesses somebody being thrown overboard.
Yeah.
And then the next day, she's being told, well, nobody lived in that cabin where she came from.
Yeah.
So, and in this new one, we sort of have a setup with people in a dark wood. Somehow people must like to be sort of frightened by these uncanny setups.
I think all of my books on some level are an exploration of a personal phobia or something that I find difficult. So The Woman in Cabin 10, the book is really about the fear of not being believed. And I think a lot of people, and maybe especially a lot of women, have that fear that if something happens to them and they go to the police and they say truthfully what their experience was, that perhaps they won't be believed. And perhaps people will say, well, she was drinking, or well, she was on medication, or she's not a reliable witness. And even though they're trying to be truthful and accurate about what they saw, their version of events is not listened to. And so that's the problem that my character grapples with in the book. And I think for me it's quite cathartic, it's quite a positive experience to write about fears and worries that I have, and for my characters to resolve them. And I think perhaps for readers it's the same experience. It's a bit like I don't know, it's a bit like going on a roller coaster or watching a scary film. You can be scared, but you can be scared in a safe way with the knowledge that the resolution at the end is probably going to be okay.
So you're not in real danger, that's the thing.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
No one's died reading my books that I know of.
I know that this is a debut novel, In a Dark, Dark Wood, which is out in Danish now.
This was my first one,
Yeah.
but in Denmark they were published the opposite way round.
And I know that you had the inspiration for the title from a children's book.
Yeah, it's an old children's rhyme in the UK, and it goes, in a dark, dark wood there was a dark, dark house, and in the dark, dark house there was a dark, dark cupboard, and in the dark, dark cupboard there was a skeleton. And it's longer than that, but when you're reading it to a little child, you jump out and you pretend to be the skeleton, and they're scared, and it's all hilarious. And there's a children's book in the UK based on this story with like a pop-up at the end, so the skeleton comes out. And it's supposed to be...
And everybody knows this.
Yeah, everybody's heard of the rhyme. And it's supposed to be funny, but as a child I always found it deeply kind of distressing, knowing that this skeleton was coming and I couldn't do anything about it.
So let's talk about the setup, and you have to stop me if I give too much away. But we have this group of girls and one guy in a dark, dark wood in a house with huge windows, glass windows. So they're exposed to, I mean, they can see everything out there, but they're exposed to people looking in.
Yeah.
And a lot of creepy things happen. But the setup is that we have this main character, Nora.
Yeah.
And she has this old friend of hers who suddenly writes her an email saying, come to my polterabend, or hen party, you would say in English. And she hasn't seen her for a long time, and actually she's not either invited to the wedding, and she doesn't know who she's going to marry.
And she doesn't know that she's getting married. And
So please continue about the setup.
That's a very good summary. I think you've done a good...
No, but just, why did you put it together this way? Because it's pretty strong if you want to, for suspense, I would say.
Well, so the initial seed of the book was a conversation I had with a friend where we both love crime thrillers, and she was saying that she had never read a crime thriller set on a hen night. And I suddenly thought, that's really strange, neither have I. And I don't know why not, because in a way it's the perfect setup for a crime novel. You have a small group of people, you have an emotional point in someone's life, it's a very important stage. And I started to think I really wanted to write this novel. And
there's a limited space of time?
Yeah, there's a limited space of time, they're all in the same area. And
they're different roles also. I mean, if you're responsible, you're probably the best friend.
Yeah.
And so on. I mean, yeah.
Well, this was the interesting thing. I have been to a lot of hen nights. I think most women of a certain age have. And you start to notice that the thing about a hen night is that it brings together people from different parts of the bride or the groom's life. And you have people from when they were at school, and people from when they were at university, and people from their current life. And you start to notice how different people are with different aspects of their life, and that maybe the person you know is not the same person that she is to her colleagues. and maybe she wasn't the same when she was at school. And you realise that the version of the person that you are seeing is just one part of their personality, and that really they have all these different sides that they aren't showing you.
It sounds like the funniest weekend ever, to go out and, just to have fun and party and so on. But it doesn't really turn out that funny. Can you?
Well, it doesn't in the book, because it's a crime novel, obviously, and as the rhyme at the beginning of the book might suggest, really, the book is about skeletons in closets. I don't know if does that expression translate into Danish? Yeah, people are nodding, like, the idea that you have a secret and that it's going to come out. But also it's about having secrets inside and having a version of yourself inside that you don't want to show to other people. And when I originally started writing the book, the house in the book was completely different. It was this old cottage, it was very creepy, it was very small. And I got about 3 or 4 chapters in, and I suddenly realised how much more interesting if the house in the book reflected this theme of being exposed and not being able to hide. And so it became the house that you described at the beginning, this huge glass house with enormous windows and no curtains, no blinds. So the people inside really, really can't hide. And that's the theme, one of the themes of the book, that people are trying to hide who they are. They're trying to hide their secrets, but they can't ultimately.
And it gets a bit more creepy. There's actually a gun in the house.
There is. Which was a little joke to anybody who knows the saying by Chekhov that if there's a gun above the mantelpiece in Act 1, you better make sure you fire the gun in Act 3 or your audience will be disappointed. And there's literally a gun above the fireplace, and it's probably not a spoiler to say it does get fired in Act 3, so yeah.
And there's weird footsteps in the snow.
Yeah.
At a certain point, we might give that away. The gun actually goes off somehow.
Yeah.
And there's a limited group of people, so there's a limited, amount of people who could be the murderer or killer or doer or whatever you want to call it.
Which seems to be something that I return to in most of my books. It's also in The Woman in Cabin 10. It's set on a cruise ship, so it's a very closed cast of characters. And I think if you have a small cast, it gives you more opportunity to really explore those characters and really find out who they are and what their personalities are.
And it turns into sort of a whodunit in the sense of Agatha Christie, who was always mentioned when you were mentioned, which I guess we can talk about that later, but that's sort of but then you have this second line of time, or where actually your main character, like in cabin number 10, you had this person who wasn't believed, and nobody trusted her, or in this one, she's actually in hospital, and she doesn't remember what happened, and she might actually be the murderer herself, so she's trying to, through her memory, to sort of reconstruct what happened. And that is sort of the way of the story is being told, that you sort of, in fractions, have to put the little pieces together.
Yeah, so my main character, has woken up in hospital 48 hours after the hen weekend, and she has had a catastrophic head injury. She can't remember what happened. She knows she's been in a car accident, and she knows that somebody has died, but she doesn't know who has died. And the police are waiting outside to talk to her, and they're asking her for her version of events, but she doesn't know. And she begins to come to the conclusion that the police are questioning her because they think she could be involved in the death, that possibly she's the killer. But she can't remember.
And then, I guess we can't tell anymore, because that's sort of...
Yeah, it's a bit difficult after that. We don't want to give away the ending.
So, it's... this sort of whodunit thing, and Agatha Christie I was just mentioning, are you inspired by her, or is it just something that people sort of attach to it because it's the same way of telling a story?
It's a really good question. I wasn't consciously inspired. I didn't decide to write an Agatha Christie, but I loved Agatha Christie as a teenager. I read a lot of her books, and I think that she plots brilliantly. Her characters are a little bit more wooden, a little bit more two-dimensional, but the plots are fantastic. And the way that you have all the clues, all the elements, and then suddenly in the last chapter everything just clicks and it all makes sense, and you think, of course, I was so stupid, I didn't understand that. For me, that's the perfect kind of crime novel. It's the moment where the solution is so obvious and you cannot understand why you didn't figure this out beforehand. But I wasn't thinking about Christie when I wrote this book. It was only when I gave it to my literary agent and she said to me, it's really strange, it's like a modern day Agatha Christie. And I hadn't thought about that before, but when she said it, I realised that there were definite similarities in terms of the way I had constructed the plot and the whodunit element, and even the title. Agatha Christie really enjoyed all those nursery rhyme titles, like 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe. I don't know if the translations are the same in Danish, but in English a lot of her titles are taken from children's stories or from nursery rhymes. And I suddenly thought, wow, yes, this is very Christie-ish. And then when I came to write what in the UK is my second book, The Woman in Cabin 10, I was thinking about that very consciously, and about the fact that Christie does setting so well. You know, when she writes books like Murder on the Orient Express, they're these beautiful, evocative, luxurious settings, but they're also kind of horrifying. They're sort of claustrophobic, and they're full of kind of slightly grotesque characters who you maybe wouldn't want to meet. And Christie never set a book on a cruise. So for me it was a way to sort of, I guess, pay homage to her a little bit and to say thank you for inspiring me, but to do something a little bit different.
Being a female crime writer in Britain is in itself a bit scary because, you have all this heritage of strong women. Also men.
Well, you do in Scandinavia as well, to be fair. But
well, in recent time, yeah. But I mean, you go back a lot longer.
Yeah, there's a long tradition from. I mean, the golden age of crime was the 1920s, 1930s, with people like Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, Ngaio Marsh, Marjorie Allingham. Yeah, and there's a huge tradition.
If you go to any summer cottage in Denmark, we have all these, books standing there waiting to be reread because people read them a lot of times.
People still love them, yeah.
And you can still find inspiration in those. And how's that regarded? Is it old-fashioned or is it just being fresh on something that people really love?
I think for a long time people were slightly dismissive. You know, it was a type of crime that was very fashionable in the 40s, 50s. And then in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it sort of started to become people were a bit, the characters aren't very real and they're not really dealing with proper social questions. Crime needs to be more serious. We need to, free ourselves from this. There's a slightly cozy element to those books where there's not a lot of blood. The crime is sort of this intellectual thing. It's not really about human emotion. But I think recently there's been a bit more of a reappraisal, and lots of the novelists are being rediscovered, and then manuscripts are being refinished. Books that they started but didn't finish. So Sophie Hannah is writing new Agatha Christie. Stella Duffy is writing a new Ngaio Marsh. Dorothy L. Sayers' books have been rewritten, and it's introducing it to a new generation of readers.
And I know you are continuing this way of writing because you already read number 3, I guess, and perhaps number 4.
Number 4 is about to come out in the UK this summer.
And can you reveal the setup of the next book, which will probably be out in Danish sometime?
So the next book in the UK order is The Lying Game, but they're all separate, so there's no series element at all. It doesn't matter what order you read them in. And it's about 4 women who were at boarding school together. And they were expelled from school for doing something, you don't know what, but 17 years after, a human bone has been discovered on the seashore near their boarding school, and they all rush down back to the town where they went to school to basically try and find out how much the police know and what has happened. And you know that they're implicated in this, you just don't know how, basically. So the book is about what did they do, how has it affected their friendship, what kind of people have they become in the years since they did this. But my 4th book is called The Death of Mrs. Westaway, and that is about a tarot reader. Does tarot? But she's a cynical tarot reader. She doesn't believe in the power of the cards. She basically uses her intuition to figure out what people are saying to her and to give them the answers she thinks they want. And one day she opens a letter from a solicitor saying, your grandmother has died and you've inherited a large sum of money. But there is a problem. Her grandmother died 20 years ago, and she realises that this letter was never meant for her, but also that she can use her skills to impersonate this person who is going to inherit the money. So she goes to the funeral and she claims the legacy, but it all kind of goes wrong from there. So I don't know if they'll be published in the same order in Denmark or what they plan to do, but hopefully both books, touch wood, hopefully both books will come out.
Something to look forward to. Thank you very much for coming to Denmark.
Thank you so
being
much.
Here. Thank you very much for coming.
And great questions.
Yes, thank you to Ruth Ware. Og Ruth Ware vil signere sin bog i bog- og idéstanden lige om et øjeblik.